on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan. How's it going?
I'm doing great.
You're doing great.
How's it going for you?
Well, I'm still a little under the weather. I'm trying, though. I'm trying to motor through.
Oh, my gosh.
Just power through.
You got to do like Tay-Tay said.
Who's Tay-Tay?
You got to shake it off.
Oh.
Yeah.
Tay-Tay.
Yeah, I'm a Swiftie. I get to call her whatever I want.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't realize you were such a fan.
She's growing on me, I'll be honest.
Really?
Yeah, and if you dig into her actual experience in the industry from a very young girl being taken advantage of, a lot of people making tons of money off of her, I admire her for fighting for her rights.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22.
Yes, exactly.
Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, so it's a crisp, cool day here in Western North Carolina. Oh my gosh.
A bit of a cold snap.
Yeah, I done had to go get some Kerr sun.
I'm ready for warm weather. That is for sure. Summer can't get here fast enough for me.
We have been teased. We've been shown another way, out of the darkness of winter.
Another way.
And here we are back in freezing my balls off. So, yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, it's cold, and I'm also being sick. That doesn't make me feel better.
No. I'm sick of her being sick too, folks.
I'm sick of being sick, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see. Maybe here in the next couple of days, I'll start to feel a little bit better. Dylan, do you have anything you would like to mention at the top of the show before we get started on today's case?
I do not. I'm still thinking about the creepy places in New York that we visited in the midweek. And some of those places sound awesome. I'd like to visit them one day in person. And other than that, I'm ready to jump right in.
Yeah, just before we got started, you said it's a shame we don't live closer to Rolling Hills Asylum because it's open till 4 a.m.
Yes, its business hours are 8. It actually was still on my computer from where we were discussing it, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. And it is a paranormal research center now. And obviously you can go do a ghost hunting tour in the middle of the night during the witching hours, which I think would be incredible.
Sounds super fun.
Well, let's do it. Let's jump in your new little Mini Cooper and just shoot up there right quick.
Okay, let's do it.
All right.
Let's get started with today's case, Dylan. We are covering stories out of New York all month long. So this means got a New York case today, got a New York case next week.
Yes. Yes, I can't wait. I love the New York cases.
All right, let's do it.
I'm doing it.
Ready?
I'm already doing it.
Oh, please calm down.
I already started.
Linda Fitzpatrick was the 18-year-old daughter of a spice merchant.
Wow.
Now, you don't hear a lot of folks call themselves spice merchants these days.
Well, I think a lot of people, or some people, don't realize how important spices were back in the day. How very important they were as far as a tradable good, a commodity. I mean, literal wars have been fought over spices, right?
And they say white people don't know how to cook with spices.
Yeah. We've been showing people how to load spices on our boats for a long time, bro.
What are they doing with all those spices? Because they sure weren't seasoning their food with it.
Yeah, mayo too spicy crowd. Well, they were taking and they were selling it for a profit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are we
assholes.
talking about like saffron, cumin, paprika?
I'm sure.
Okay. So her father was a Princeton graduate, and he earned a small fortune, providing Linda with the advantages money and power could buy. She grew up in a 30-room mansion by the Greenwich Country Club in Connecticut, attending Greenwich Country Day School.
Ah, the legendary country day schools.
Your mom went to a fancy country day school, didn't she?
My mother did go to country day school here in Asheville. Yeah. Turns out her people had some money, a little bit of money.
They were rich, but unfortunately you did not inherit any of that.
No.
The small fortune was squandered.
No, the only thing I inherited from them was some mental issues.
Yay.
So thanks, guys.
She later went to Oldsfield School in Baltimore. They were a family who vacationed in Bermuda. I mean, these are people who have money. It's not just like, hey, we get to go on a vacation to Bermuda like one time in our life. They go like every summer and rent a house.
Stay for a month.
Stay for like the whole summer.
Yeah.
How fancy.
Yeah, you know.
Linda played field hockey. She won swimming and equestrian awards. Her mother, Dorothy Ann Rush, had been a model and cover girl in the 1930s. Yet Linda never quite achieved the beauty of her mother or older sister Cindy. Instead, Linda seemed more interested in sports and painting. The family wealth included an apartment on New York City's famed Fifth Avenue. The Fitzpatricks were a stable family who enjoyed doing things together, including taking those summer vacations every year. The family included 7 children. Linda and 9-year-old Missy were of this marriage. Then there were Perry, Robert, Carol, and David from Mr. Fitzpatrick's first marriage, which had ended in divorce. His wife had a daughter, Cindy, from her first marriage. So it's a big blended family.
It's the rich Brady bunch.
With a lot of kids, yeah. The summer of 1967 was typical. Linda had recently been named art editor for the Oldsfield School Yearbook. She joined her family for a month-long vacation in Bermuda, where her parents had been renting a home for the past few years. Now, typically the whole family would come together for the trip, but this summer it was just Linda, Missy, her parents, and her older sister Cindy, along with Cindy's husband. Linda spent the vacation splashing in the water, painting, attending parties, and shopping with her mother and sisters. Linda and her younger sister Missy were incredibly close. Linda and Cindy had also had a very special relationship as children, being the only 2 girls.
Okay.
On July 31st, the family returned to Connecticut. Linda spent most of August at her family's mansion. They described her as, quote, a typical Linda. She had an art studio in the back of the house where she spent a great deal of her time. When she wasn't painting, Linda played piano and went swimming with Missy in the family's pool. If Linda went to New York City during the month of August, it was just a quick trip. She didn't spend much time there. It was more like a short shopping trip into the city. Yet Linda's friends had different versions of the girls' summer. Linda, who liked to hang out in the village, the Greenwich Village, Dylan.
And I would imagine during this time, when this story takes place, that was a rather unique and interesting place.
It was a happening place.
A legendary place.
She had told friends that she spent her summer in Bermuda taking LSD and smoking grass. A far cry from what her family saw.
Yeah, man.
Linda had met a new friend, Susan Robinson, in August when she showed up in the East Village. The Robinsons' apartment served as a kind of crash pad where hippies could spend the night. So just any random person who heard about Susan's apartment could just show up, and Susan and her husband would offer them a place to stay.
All right. Would you? I know the answer to this, but would you be comfortable with a situation like that?
No.
Just strange, random
But this
people?
is also not the summer of love, Dylan.
No.
Okay, we're in like the summer of I don't like people. And that summer's been happening for like the whole time I've met you. So
Yeah, we're going into the summer of possibly the world's ending. It's
Yes.
quite different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Susan and her husband David had a 2-bedroom apartment on East 13th Street with posters of Allen Ginsberg and Timothy Leary lining the walls. So they are sort of like in the heart of this hippie subculture that is taking over New York City at the time.
So this bohemian-esque, beatnik-like, just kind of, yeah, man, just chilling, trying to vibe. They're wanting a vibe, right?
Taking the drugs,
Yeah.
listening to the musics,
Yes.
hanging out.
Reading something and then telling someone else about it and acting like you're really smart because you read it before they did. Stuff like that.
Okay. Well, Linda first arrived at the Robinsons' apartment with a guy named Pigeon.
Okay. Yes. That's it.
Linda had bought Pigeon some LSD, and the foursome spent the evening hanging out. Then Linda left suddenly. A few nights later, Linda showed up at the Robinsons' door again, this time with a kid from Boston. Linda had bought this young man some LSD too. Linda would come into the city with $30 or $40, buying acid for anyone who wanted some. And at that time, Dylan, seems like a lot of people want some acid.
A lot of people. And this is the old school, original, hardcore LSD. Right?
Makes my stomach hurt just thinking about it.
Yes, but I would think it's... yes, your poor little body does not like hallucinogenics.
No.
You somehow figured that out. But yeah, this is rather intense. An intense drug. That's the way I'm going to view it, because I know it was.
Linda complained to Susan and David that she had been burned quite a few times. On one occasion, Linda and David went to Tompkins Park, where she bought 3 tabs of acid for $10 each. Linda made a comment that she hoped it was good stuff. She and David took their tabs. Within 45 minutes, they were off.
$10 a piece?
$10 a piece.
Wow.
Is that expensive?
Well, that's literally what you could... some people have told me, friends, some people I know, that's what you could get it for nowadays. I'm just surprised that seems...
Inflation hasn't changed the price of acid tabs, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's been, yes, it's still a similar price.
Well, I guess back in the day, it was more rare.
So I'm going to, yeah, that's a good
It
point.
was more profitable. I
I'd
don't know.
say that's a pretty good profit margin on it. $10 a hit back then, that's good money.
After a night of wandering around the city with David, Linda caught a train back to Greenwich around 8 a.m. David said she must have still been high when she got back to her parents' house. But her parents, they have no idea that she's tripping balls.
So her parents are squares, as they would call them back then, and they have no idea what someone who's used any of these substances would act like. They've not been around it at all. So, yeah. They just think she's acting weird or she must be tired or something like that.
Well, that same weekend back in Greenwich, Linda went shopping for an entirely new wardrobe to get ready for school. Linda had even agreed to get her hair cut, which pleased her mother. Mrs. Fitzpatrick took her daughter to Saks Fifth Avenue, where the hairdresser gave Linda what was known as a Sassoon bob cut, because her mother just didn't like the long, sort of stringy, hippie style she'd been wearing her hair.
So she wants her to go shorter, or she basically
More
wants
fashionable, fashion forward.
the opposite of hippie looking.
The opposite of hippie.
Okay.
Yeah. She wants her to look like a very well-groomed young lady. With school starting in 11 days, Linda had gone into the city on September 1st. Much to her mother's dismay, when Linda returned, she announced to the family that she wanted to drop out of Oldsfield School. Now, her plan was to live in the village, the East Village, by the way, and paint. Linda's favorite teachers, a married couple who taught English and art at the school, had gone to Europe for the summer, and the pair decided not to return to their teaching jobs. They were going to just stay in Europe.
That sounds fun.
Linda was devastated. She told her mother without them at school, she had no desire to go back. Linda felt there wasn't much more she could learn about art at Oldsfields. The school had offered to set up a special course for Linda, like in the art area, kind of like so she could do independent study. The school had offered to set this program up for her, but Linda wasn't really interested in taking more courses. At this point, she's like, look, I feel like I've gone as far as I can when it comes to art school.
Here's the
I've
thing.
got the technique down.
Right.
I don't need to know any more about art history. I'm good.
Here's what Linda's doing from a father's perspective. She just doesn't want to be in school anymore. She has imagined a new path for herself. And as far as her favorite teachers not coming back and all this, she's just trying to use that as a reasoning for this to tell her parents. And she just doesn't want to do it anymore. She wants to try something different.
Well, Linda felt more art education wouldn't necessarily make her a better artist. Her desire was to live as an artist. She wanted to create art, not study art. And I think that makes sense. I mean, if you're a creative type, you want to be creating and not studying. I get that.
Right.
And as far as art goes, you know, I mean, can you really learn, you either have the talent or you don't.
Well, and I think some people are just
I
different.
feel like you can kind of only go so far as when you're taking art classes.
Right. And some people do enjoy the student or, the study side of it, learning more about the history and all that. And then some people just want to do it. They want to live in it, eat, live, breathe it,
And I get that to a point. You want to make the art, not study the art. And honestly, whether or not you get a master's degree is probably not going to affect whether or not you can make a living as an artist. There's a lot of folks out there with those master's degrees and that type of thing, and they're doing something completely different. So I get Linda's point of view of, I don't want to be in school anymore. I want to be living the life.
It's true. And like you say with the masters, I think some of that part of the achievement is for that person who enjoys being a student, obviously, because they're going to do it another 10 or 12 years beyond what most people will do it, or however long. And that's part of it, even if, they've achieved something. But
Yeah, unless you want to teach or something, So Linda wasn't really interested in pursuing any more education. She didn't want to get an MFA. She was ready to do the damn thing. So Linda and her mother spoke at length before discussing the dropout with her father.
And I'm going to assume she's been thinking this for quite a while, but she has wondered and thought about how to break this news to her parents, because they're going to have certain expectations for her.
Oh, yeah. They're a family of wealth. They're
educated.
They have certain standards. They want to maintain a certain appearance in front of their friends.
They literally live next door to the Joneses.
Yeah, exactly. Now, at first, Mr. Fitzpatrick demanded that she finish school. Yet after discussing it with the family and some friends, her parents reluctantly agreed. They gave her permission, but not approval.
Right. We'll allow you to do it, but we still think it's not the right thing for you to do.
Linda left for New York City on Monday morning. It was the last time her parents would ever see her alive. So this is like every parent's worst nightmare. You're agreeing to something that you're not really okay with. You begrudgingly let your kid do this thing, and you're thinking the worst thoughts about what could possibly go wrong, and then it does.
And then the worst happens anyway.
It's just not good.
Nobody
wants this.
That sounds horrible. As far as a parent trying to get over this.
Village Plaza Hotel, a nice hotel on Washington Place, that's where Linda told her parents she would be staying. Yet the Village Plaza Hotel was not exactly as Linda described it. According to The Gothamist, the hotel had no doorman. The sign was at the front desk offering TV rentals and no refunds, and all rents must be paid in advance. It was a seedy place, a far cry from the family's apartment on Fifth Avenue. Linda said it was a perfectly safe place. This is what she's told her parents. Another assurance Linda gave her parents was that she'd be living with a roommate, a young woman named Paula Bush, who was about 22 years old and worked as a receptionist, and she came from a very good family. Her mother, Dorothy, said this made her feel a lot better, knowing Linda has a nice roommate from a good, solid family.
So her parents are picturing the Waldorf.
Yes.
And she's actually living in a place that you likely may be able to rent a room by the hour.
That's exactly the kind of place that it is, Dylan. And you also have to rent your TV.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you up front, there's no refunds for any reason, even if there's blood on the mattress.
No.
Okay.
And Dylan, there was no Paula Bush. Instead, there was a Paul Bush.
That's quite different. One letter. Look at one letter. How much difference that makes.
On September 4th, Linda moved into the hotel with Paul Bush and a guy named Bob Brumberger, two hippies.
These don't sound like real names. They sound made up.
They moved into room 504 with Linda paying in advance $120, which equaled a month's rent. Now, can you imagine renting a place for 1 month in New York City for $120?
No, because I literally saw a video 30 minutes ago that was, this is what $3,000 a month gets me in New York, and it was disgusting, and it was smaller than a closet.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, I've seen many of those videos on TikTok.
I don't know. I mean,
city life is not for you.
No, it's not.
No, I've already told Dylan. He's never been to New York City, and I keep telling him, we need to go visit because it's definitely an experience you need to have. But after a weekend in New York City, Dylan, you're going to be ready to leave. You're not cut out for city life.
No.
It's not for you.
It sounds like way too much going on and way too many people.
You're not interested in a 6-story walk-up apartment for $3,000 a month that gets you like a closet, basically?
No.
You can fit a twin bed in it, and that's it?
Well, and what you said is it's about the lifestyle, and you don't sit around in your apartment. It's literally a place to come wash your face, keep your belongings locked up, and sleep. And you're going out, you're getting off work, you're going out meeting friends, having a drink, socializing. And that kind of makes sense, but yeah, that's not me.
It's not you.
No.
The desk clerk recalled that Linda had a lot of male visitors. They were described as, quote, anybody off the street, the dirtiest bearded hippies she could find. The clerk had made remarks to Linda that she shouldn't live like that, but Linda never replied with any snark. Linda had a certain elegance about her. She would just kind of nod and smile and let the clerk have his or her opinion.
So I'm going to let this sink in here. So here you have a desk clerk at this seedy hotel flop house of sorts.
Yes.
Who sees everything coming and going. And even by what he's exposed to all the time, she is hanging out with lowlifes, what this desk clerk would consider the lowest of the low.
And this desk clerk sees a lot of
and
low
they
lives.
see it all. And
Yes.
their metric is, even though I see a bunch of shit, she hangs out with low lives.
Plus, I think around this time, Dylan, when the hippie culture was really cranking up, normies, like regular folks, viewed them in a certain way.
Okay, so even if you're not a skeezy low life, just having the hair
and the beard,
dressing a certain way?
Yes.
Okay.
I think people automatically assumed that you were just sort of really scuzzy. Even if you were just a normal, you just sort of, looked that way, but maybe you were a normal person who worked and had a job and lived, like everybody else, you were still viewed in a certain way.
Okay.
Right?
I think you're right.
Them long-haireds. Yeah.
Long-haired hippie types.
People didn't like them.
Get a haircut. Get a real job.
Exactly.
They might have a real job already.
Your mom could probably speak to some of this discrimination because your mom was a hippie.
I'm sure she could.
Your mom was a little groovy hippie chick.
And she's a little flower
I was
child.
going to say your mom's still like a groovy hippie chick.
She was out there doing her damn thing right around this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Linda lived at the hotel until September 20th of 1967. Upon moving out, she informed the clerk there were some people in her room, but otherwise it should be okay. So I'm leaving behind a few people for you, but it's not trashed or anything. There's just some random people in there.
You might have to go tell them to leave at some point.
Right.
But I'm checking out.
Yes. The hotel room was a far cry from her beautifully decorated room in Greenwich. At home, Linda had a canopy bed decorated with her favorite colors, red and white. She had an orange and black tiger on the bed from her father's alma mater, Princeton. The room at the hotel had light green walls and a peeling gray dresser with the upper left drawer missing. She shared a communal bathroom with others that were staying on the hallway.
Oh, no. That's
So coming from like this very beautifully decorated room where she has anything she wants in the comfort of a 30-room mansion to living in this divey motel where she has to share a bathroom with other people.
And you described that, most people are like, why in the world? Or that must have been a shock to Linda. But I think this is what Linda's looking. I mean, obviously, this is what she wants.
It's the age of Aquarius.
And she thinks the communal, nasty, sharing the bathroom and all that is cool. She's like, I want to go live. This is the way I want to live. And it's totally different than what she's used to. And all her friends and family back home, and they would all be aghast at what she's doing, and I'm sure she thinks about that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure when her mother found out she was sharing a communal bathroom, was beside herself.
That's a deal breaker for me. Sharing, I could share a kitchen before I could share a bathroom with strangers.
Yeah, I don't want to share a bathroom with strangers. It's weird enough, like camping.
Yeah.
When you have like a communal bathroom type of situation.
And you're showering and such.
Yeah.
But the whole time I'm about to puke.
I'm wearing my flip-flops and like not trying to touch anything.
You don't even want to share a bathroom with me.
Yeah, I know.
And we sleep in the same bed.
It's true. While in the city, Linda phoned her parents to say she was earning $80 a week making posters for the Poster Bazaar. A week later, she called to say she'd switched to Imports Limited, where they offered her $85 a week. She sounded excited and happy, according to her mother. Yet, there was no place called Poster Bazaar. At the address Linda had given her parents was a shop called Fred Leighton's Mexican Imports Ltd. Their records showed that Linda worked for 3 days, September 11th, 12th, and 13th. She earned $2 an hour selling dresses before she was let go.
Oh, wow. That was like, get out of here.
According to a sales girl who worked with Linda, she was always coming in late. Then on the 14th, Linda stated she had a doctor's appointment and just never came back. So before she left, Linda asked her manager not to tell her parents she wasn't working there if they called.
Wait, let me get this straight. In a 3-day window,
Yes.
she got a reputation for coming to work late.
Yes.
So she's literally been late every day for 3 days,
And
and
then
she just
said,
started.
I have a doctor's appointment, and then just like left and never came back.
Yeah, and by the way, if my parents or anyone calls asking about me, don't tell them anything.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes. That's exactly what she was doing.
Okay.
David Robinson said after Linda's unsuccessful employment at the shop, she started panhandling in Washington Square. According to him, Linda was quite good at it, earning enough money to eat, which was considered an accomplishment. If you could panhandle and get enough money to get yourself 3 square meals a day, you were rich by panhandling standards.
Yeah, because you're living this free life, this free, no responsibilities, and you're still scraping it out. You're still able to make it.
Again, this is very different in contrast to the indulgent lifestyle Linda was accustomed to living in Connecticut's high society, where every Friday they went to the country club and had a steak, surf and turf dinner.
That sounds good, and I'm sure it was great food and all, but it sounds so stuffy. I mean, I could see how a young person would be just like, oh my God, I'm being, smothered with this normal bullshit.
And now Linda's like, I'm as free as a bird now.
Oh my God, don't you dare do that to Tom Petty. Stop. I'm going to stop you right there.
Tom Petty.
Oh.
That was Leonard Skinner.
Oh.
That sang
Well, don't you
Freebird.
do that to Leonard. Whoever you're fucking up,
Oh my God.
don't do it. Don't do it.
Tom Petty.
I'm not allowing it.
I'm firing you. You don't know who sings Freebird?
Yeah, I just couldn't even tell what song it really was because you did such a bad job.
Thank you. Well, I'm sick.
I love you too,
I'm
baby.
sick and fuck you. Okay, Linda's mother had given her a sum of money before leaving for New York City, which she might have held on to, and she was kind of able to make ends meet with this little bit of money her mom had given her. Those who knew Linda in her new life said she didn't seem like she had much at all. I mean, she's out panhandling so she can get a bite to eat.
Well, it seems like she's intent on, because I'm sure, see, she's painting this picture to her parents that she has this self-sufficient life in New York City. I have a job, I'm making money, I'm covering the rent, everything's great. Because I'm sure it's like she doesn't want to ask them for money because they have money. I'm sure they would be willing to give her some kind of a stipend.
She could probably live in her parents' Fifth Avenue apartment.
Well, yeah.
That's sitting empty.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about it. Yeah,
Right?
They have the Fifth Avenue apartment they just go stay at sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, but she doesn't want anything with that to do with that lifestyle.
She doesn't.
And she's going to make it on her own one way or the other.
So her mother thinks Linda is destined to be a career girl. She had no idea that her daughter was out begging on the street. According to David Robinson, Linda seemed obsessed with money. She often talked about working as an illustrator with Hallmark, where she could make $40,000 a year.
Wow.
She discussed renting a big fancy apartment on the Upper East Side where she could entertain all of her hippie friends. The art Linda was making in New York City was in the realm of psychedelic art. It was like dragons, devils, women with distorted faces with phrases like forever the mind or flying high.
Yeah.
Scrawled over top. You know the images that look like blacklight posters
Yeah.
of that time period.
Yeah, I can totally
I
picture
can
what you're...
exactly
Yeah.
picture. Yeah, like mushrooms and neon colors, right?
Smiling caterpillars and shit like that.
Yes, something that you would find in like a head shop with a black light.
Now you make me want to light some incense.
It was very different from the gentle landscape paintings her family had seen from her.
Oh, so even her art would shock her parents.
Yeah, because they'd
Basically.
seen her painting these little landscapes.
They're
Like,
like,
oh,
"Oh,
how
this-"
cute, you know. It's
Yeah.
a pretty little beach scene.
But then she's really painting like a dragon with his belly exploding and like devils coming out of it.
Yeah.
Giving devil horns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though Linda's mother said she was never particularly interested in boys, her friends in New York City told a different story. Linda had received a proposal in August from a young man who lived in Arizona. She had met at school. Linda said he was very nice, but too anxious. Her mother said nearly every young man who took interest in Linda was dismissed right away. But in New York City, Linda had a plethora of young men in her life. First, there was a guy named Pigeon, then a boy from Boston, then Paul Bush that she moved into the hotel with.
Okay.
And that lasted for a short period.
Well, she's just, living her best life.
Bush was 19 years old and described as a real drifter. He carried a lizard around his neck, like a pet lizard. It would just chill like a necklace.
Okay. I'm sure people would remember
Yes.
him because of that.
Linda met Paul a few days after he arrived in town, which was on August 18th. Linda described her parents as always bugging her. This is what she's telling Paul. She asked Paul and that guy Bill Brumberger, who was from New Jersey, if they wanted to get a place together. Brumberger stayed only a few days. Bush a little longer, though he said Linda was always bringing different men to their room.
Well, I could see that affecting your relationship with someone.
Yeah.
They're always bringing other people to home.
Well, I mean, unless you have that kind of agreement, that would be awkward, right? Toward the end of September, Linda told her friend Susan Robinson she was concerned about pregnancy. Susan was also pregnant, and Linda feared the LSD she'd been taking would impact the baby if she were, in fact, pregnant. Yeah, that's probably not a good thing.
No.
Not to mention that she's not sure who this baby belongs to, and I can't imagine the Fitzpatricks would be okay with this.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if she knows whose baby it is or not. They're not going to be okay with a child out of wedlock.
But especially if she's like, well, shit, I don't know who my baby daddy is. They're going to be like, what?
I've narrowed it down to a list.
It could be anywhere from 3 to 20 men.
It depends on...
when the baby comes out with a beard, we'll know more, right? Now, Mr. Fitzpatrick refused to believe his daughter was hanging out with hippies. He recalled watching a CBS special about the San Francisco hippies and how he just abhorred the scene. His daughter Linda had made similar statements during the show, like, oh, these people are so gross and disgusting. Yet her brother said Linda had commented on knowing Galahad, a New York hippie leader, after seeing his name in the newspaper. Linda expressed that Galahad was helping people. Friends who knew Linda best said she was obsessed with the Haight-Ashbury scene in San Francisco and that she really wanted to get out west.
Ah, yes, the legendary Haight-Ashbury scene.
Yeah, or Haight-Ashbury. I'm not sure how you say it. In September, Linda visited, okay? According to Susan, Linda was disappointed when she arrived in the Haight.
Oh, so she went.
She went in September.
Because Linda
after she moved out of her motel room.
She gets to do whatever she wants.
Yeah. Instead of peace and love, Linda said everyone was on speed, which was methadone at the time, and that the scene was bad. She couldn't get back to New York City fast enough. Linda spent 2 days driving back. She told Susan while in San Francisco she'd met 2 warlocks and agreed to drive them back to New York City with her.
Wait a second. Like, people in a gang called the warlocks, or these actual warlocks?
No, like real warlocks.
Yes.
Like wizardry sons of bitches, Dylan.
I see.
Like the cloak, probably would read Harry Potter books now. I don't know.
So they can do magic.
Yeah.
But they have to bum rides.
Yes.
Okay.
They have yet to be able to manifest
I have not been able to.
transportation.
I've not reached that level of transcendence yet. Do you mind dropping me by the gas station?
Exactly. Now, Linda had told Susan several times that she was a witch. And she was into witchy stuff, right? Linda believed she could manifest things like money when she needed it. Linda firmly believed she had these supernatural powers, and she would kind of talk about it a lot. Now, Susan and David, this married couple, thought, okay, maybe she's just high as a kite.
Right. Yeah.
And in her mind, she has magical powers, but she's really just, on the couch tripping balls because she's taking LSD.
Yeah, maybe you should just manifest a job. That's probably a good thing you can do if you can make stuff happen.
Well, Linda told Susan while she was in California, one of the warlocks took her mind apart, scattered it, then put it back together.
Whoa.
And Linda felt the warlock now owned her.
Oh, and he still can't get a ride.
No, he got a ride from Linda.
Ah,
Okay?
see, because this is a deconstructed brain.
Linda was like, ass, gas, grass, or scramble my mind. Nobody rides for free.
And after he put her mind back together,
So he mind scrambled her.
she was just like, sure, I'll take you. No questions asked.
Yes. During her drive, Linda mailed a postcard from Knightstown, Indiana, stating she was on her way to visit Bob, her brother, who happens to be an attorney in Los Angeles. So she sent this to her parents. Linda wrote she had a lead on a good painting job in Berkeley, California. She would be painting concert posters. So if that were truly a job lead, painting concert posters in Berkeley, like how fucking cool would that be?
Well, imagine the concert at this time, the posters that she would be doing.
Yeah, like Janis Joplin live at the Fillmore or something, right?
Yeah, legendary shows, literally.
Yeah, in early October, her brother Bob, remember he's an attorney, his office had received a phone call from his sister, but they informed her that he wasn't in LA at the time, but he was working in San Francisco. And she never called back after that. Now,
She's always giving her parents like half truths.
it's true.
You know?
Now, the warlock, who called himself Pepsi.
His warlock name's Pepsi.
Yes.
Okay.
They met at a nightclub called the Glory Hole.
You're making this up.
No,
man.
it's true.
This is not real.
They met at a nightclub called the Glory Hole, Dylan.
Okay.
Pepsi said Linda was, quote, a real meth monster, which was a term used to describe a speed freak.
Wow.
Once they arrived in New York City, Linda set them up in an apartment on Avenue B. Part of the deal was Linda agreed to keep the place tidy, but Pepsi said she mostly just sat around. Linda talked a lot about making art, but Pepsi said she wasn't really that talented.
You know, but he's claiming she was basically a speed freak, really into amphetamines of some sort. But it seems that Linda didn't care for that, hey, Ashbury scene that had been overtaken by amphetamines and all that, and kind of the psychedelics pushed out. We've covered this before, and it was just a really not a good scene. So many people.
Well, she can like do it at speed, but maybe she's not okay with like everybody else around her tweaking.
Well, that's true. And plus, let's be honest, that when she arrived there, she arrived to overcrowding, not enough infrastructure, just deplorable conditions. You know what I mean? Literally like cholera spreading because it's just so gross and overcrowded.
And hippies sleeping in the parks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to our 3-part series on Charles Manson, we get into what that scene was really like.
Yes, and it very quickly became uncool, man.
That it was not just flower power.
No, it was high pressure hose power because we got to scrub the filth off the streets.
Pepsi said, quote, she was supposed to be this great artist, but it wasn't much good. It was just teeny bopper stuff, drawing one curving line, then sort of embellishing it.
So Pepsi, the warlock, is not a fan of her art.
He is not impressed.
But, I mean, you know, dude, you're going around telling people to call you Pepsi. So, you know.
Pepsi said Linda was a good kid, and if she had not been so geeked out on meth, he thought she had potential. He said she was a lot of fun to be with. On a few occasions, Linda joined him on spiritual seances, and one day they went on the Staten Island ferry together.
It seems maybe that Linda thinks more highly of Pepsi than Pepsi thinks of Linda.
Maybe. Pepsi saw Linda at 10 p.m. on Saturday, October 8th, standing in front of the Cave on Avenue A with her new boyfriend, Groovy, whose real name was James Leroy Hutchinson. She informed Pepsi she had taken 1.5 grams of speed and that she was feeling high. 3 hours later, 3 hours later, Linda and Groovy would be dead, brutally murdered on a boiler room floor, their heads bludgeoned by bricks.
Oh my gosh.
This story is fucked up, Dylan. So let's talk about Groovy. James Hutchinson was born February 19th of 1946 to parents Esther and Joseph. Esther was Portuguese on her mother's side, and her large family were big influences on the boy. Esther had 13 siblings. So when I say she came from a large family, she came from a large family.
How does a woman even do that? Produce 13 human beings?
14, because
14,
that's
yeah.
Esther and 13 siblings.
My gosh.
Yeah, it's a lot. Joseph was a sailor stationed at Quonset Point during World War II. After they were married, the couple moved to Pawtucket, where Esther made jewelry to support her growing family. James's older brother George was adopted out to one of Joseph's relatives, and their marriage didn't last for very long. After the divorce, Esther married another man, a trucker named Bob Benoit. Together, they had 2 children, Brenda and Ronald. At just 5 years old, James was known as Jimmy to his family. He moved with his mother and stepfather to Central Falls. Jimmy had learning disabilities. He repeated the first grade. He was described as, quote, a low achiever, borderline student with difficulty reading and comprehension. Jimmy had a below average IQ. So he was placed in a remedial program, but he never earned grades to be on the same level as his peers. Like, this program was supposed to help students kind of get to grade level, and then they would go join the rest of their age group.
Right, and he may have gotten some help or growth from the program, but it still didn't get him to grade level.
He spent 5 years in the remedial program until he was nearly 15 years old. By far the oldest student in the elementary school program. Because he's 15 and he's in class with like 4th and 5th graders.
Oh my gosh. Poor guy.
Teachers said Jimmy was emotionally disturbed with behavioral problems. Acting out as class clown, Jimmy wasn't mean-spirited, but he was willing to do just about anything to get attention. I think we know kids like this. We've probably all been in school with a kid like that.
Well, I wasn't that bad, but I was a bit of a class clown. But I think possibly what he's doing is overcompensating for obviously probably feel some really insecure about this.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to think it's cool to be 15 years old and still going to school with 4th and 5th graders.
Right.
Or be at their level in, ability to read and those things.
I think you're right on the money, Dylan. He couldn't hack being in school. Finally, administrators decided the teenager should be placed in a trade school program. His mother placed him at Butler Hospital in an outpatient psychiatric treatment program. So as a teenager, Jimmy became leader of a neighborhood gang called the Mondos. His gang would drink Rupert's beer. They would ride wild pigs at a local slaughterhouse.
Oh.
And Jimmy was always up to some kind of antics.
Let's go ride them wild pigs down there at the slaughterhouse.
That's exactly what he would say. He would take the other kids down there and they would climb into these like hog pens.
Yeah.
And he would try to ride these hogs like he was a rodeo
Well,
rider.
I gotta say, for antics that gangs get into, typically, crime and very serious issues, this bunch doesn't sound very scary.
Well, these are like the youth gangs of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Like they were hoods, but they weren't really doing like...
They weren't doing anything.
Yeah, they were like hoodlums, but they weren't really doing the kind of hoodlum shit you think of today with gangs.
No, it's just petty vandalism and just
they
goofing
wore leather
off.
jackets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just hung out all day.
Pretty much. So by now, his mother had divorced Benoit. She quit working, and the family lived in a cramped apartment getting monthly welfare. Jimmy was always described as very clean, well-dressed, and had a flair for flashy fashion. As a big brother, Jimmy adored his younger siblings, often babysitting Brenda and Ronald. So by September of 1962, Jimmy entered a machinist program at this trade school. He couldn't read or write or do math. He relied heavily on the teacher who helped him get through. And though Jimmy wasn't book smart, he did have street smarts. Jimmy was mouthy, but not tough. Once he got his ass kicked by a nerdy kid he'd been bullying. Friends called Jimmy a cream puff. He was all bark, no bite.
Okay, so he'd run that.
He would run his mouth, but like this little nerdy, scrawny kid, like beat the shit out of him.
Flap those gums.
Yeah.
But he's got nothing to back it up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yet he managed to get in trouble as a teenager. Jimmy once talked his 29-year-old neighbor into buying him some beer. Some other kids in the neighborhood tried to take the beer, so Jimmy pulled a machete out and cut one of the boys on the arm.
Oh, gosh.
He was arrested and given a $1,500 bond. It was right around the same time that he was set to graduate from the trade school. So his teacher pushed for Jimmy to earn a diploma despite the arrest. However, nothing came of the charges because the victim refused to testify and Jimmy was released. Jimmy took jobs at several manufacturing facilities where he was described as a hard worker. Like, he did really well in the workforce. Jimmy saved his money, eventually buying a car and then a motorcycle. On the weekends, he dragged friends into New York City to Greenwich Village, where Jimmy was fascinated by the hippies. Jimmy wore a black leather jacket, black skinny pants, and black boots with a Cuban heel. He slicked his long hair back. So he had a look.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he definitely had a look and stood out among the hippies when they went to the city. Because, they're all kind of long hair, whatever, and then he's all decked out in his black Cuban heel boots.
Now, I can't even picture the Cuban heel boots, but does he have more of a greaser look going?
He's got like a greaser look thing happening, yeah.
Okay.
By now, Jimmy was heavily tattooed, and though well-dressed, police in Central Falls considered him a wise guy. By April of 1966, Jimmy was fed up with Central Falls. He was always being hassled by cops. So he withdrew money from savings, bought a car, and left town with only a suitcase. Along with his gang buddy, Dave Quebec, they moved to New York City.
Dave Quebec?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jimmy found work with a New Jersey-based carnival. The pair traveled up and down the East Coast with the carnival. They became carnies, Dylan.
I mean, that sounds like, honestly, a cool, fun thing to do when you're young.
Doesn't it, though?
I mean, it does. You get to see the country, possibly the world, depending on where you travel. And just you don't stay in one place very long. You're meeting all kinds of interesting people. I'm sure the carnival's already full of a motley crew,
I think it sounds fun.
Yeah, totally.
So they travel around. Jimmy worked as a roustabout, setting up tents, and sometimes he sold tickets to a freak show. See, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I want to sell tickets to the freak show.
You'd make a great barker.
I would love to be a carnival barker.
Yeah.
Anton LaVey was a carnival barker.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
He was a lot of other things, too.
He was.
Including gross.
He joined another... You think Anton LaVey was gross?
Am I thinking of the other one? I always get them crossed.
Are you thinking of Aleister Crowley?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Crowley's gross. He was gross. He did gross things.
No, he was gross.
Yeah.
I don't know if Anton LaVey was gross.
No, I'm sorry. I always crossed him up. I apologize.
He seemed a bit more hygienic than Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, let's call it that. He was quite a bit more hygienic.
There were some decades betwixt them as well.
Right.
Okay, so he joined another carnival, which took him through the South. Jimmy sent his mother postcards from places like North Carolina, Florida, New Orleans. It was on February 7th of 1967 that Jimmy met Galahad, an ex-carny in New Orleans. And Galahad was a hippie, and he would sort of become like this hippie leader in New York City.
Right, the same Galahad.
Linda knew
Okay.
Galahad. Now, it was in New Orleans that someone nicknamed Jimmy Groovy, which stuck. Jimmy had only been a drinker, but by the time he reached NOLA, Groovy was using LSD pretty regularly. Galahad and Groovy hitchhiked back to New York City together, camping out for 3 weeks at a bookstore owned by some hippies in the East Village. Groovy became tired of camping and couch surfing, and he announced to Galahad that they needed to get a, quote, crash pad.
So just some little cheap, doesn't have to be fancy, but a spot they can call their own.
Yeah, I mean, though Jimmy Groovy is like interested in this hippie lifestyle and he's fascinated by him, he's a pretty boy. He wants to shower. He wants to be dapper.
He wants to have his clothes and his hair
smell
products.
Nice and have the hair products. Yeah.
In his own space.
Yeah, he's not into just sleeping at a bookstore, camping out on the floor.
He doesn't want to be grungy.
He doesn't. No, he seems like he's a little bit different. Like he don't want that. Right? He wants to be able to spray on his Old Spice.
This high karate.
For $35 a month, they secured an apartment. The crash pad was open to anyone who needed a place to stay, including runaways. Often, Groovy and Galahad encouraged the young people to return home. Grateful parents rewarded them with cash, television sets.
Wow, they're out here doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, I mean, they really kind of were. Yet helping runaways landed Groovy in trouble. He was arrested for, quote, impairing morals of a minor on April 27th, but was released when it was discovered that the girl was older than 16. Police raided their apartment multiple times without warrants, looking for runaways and drugs. Galahad was considered like the brains of their operation, but Groovy was like the charisma.
Okay, so Groovy sucks him in, and then Galahad sets him straight.
Yeah.
Okay.
LSD was a big part of Groovy's life by that point, and he was also regularly using speed. Now, Dylan, I've never tried speed. I've never done speed. But I'm just imagining that speed and LSD are probably not like good things to be mixing.
No, those are worlds apart as far as the type of high you get. Obviously, LSD is just a whole nother experience, with the visuals and all that. And speed is more of it's your wired for sound, as I call it.
So I imagine using the two, that just can't.
Oh, if he's using these simultaneously, I cannot even imagine what kind of what's happening in his body.
Well, from what I understand, he was mixing the two.
Because that puts me in the mind of speedballing, or when you're doing heroin and cocaine at the same time. Your body wants to go in two different directions. The one's a downer and one's more of an upper. And and I don't know. It seems dangerous to me.
It seems very dangerous.
Well, for one, I would hate to be high on speed mixed with the hallucinogenic qualities of the LSD, because that sounds very scary.
Right?
Yes.
None of this is for me. I'm very square. Midsummer, Groovy took off with a group to Woodstock, New York, where they slept in barns and camped outside. When he returned, Galahad and Groovy decided they were going to Montreal. Then they hitchhiked to Denver, then San Francisco. Galahad was due in court, so they returned back to New York City. Upon their return, the two stayed at different apartments, but met up during the day to panhandle together. And by now, Groovy was visibly unwell, all hopped up on speed. Someone described him as the minstrel to Galahad's king. He was always dancing, zooming around. He had the zoomies all the time because he's all fucked up out of his head on speed.
I hate to say this, but I do believe the young lady who checked me out at the register at our local Family Dollar may have had the zoomies that he's having.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she was having trouble.
Was this earlier when you went to buy some floor cleaner?
Yes.
Which,
God,
by the way, thank you. I'd love to mop.
God love her, but she was doing drugs. Hey, but I get it. Sometimes you got to do drugs just to make it through the day.
Just to zoom around?
And if you got to work at the dollar store.
Maybe she was putting her zoom in a boom boom.
She was.
Okay.
But she was doing her best to be polite. So I'm just going to let her live her best life. I don't know her. I don't know what she's dealing with.
Well, here's Groovy. He's just like dancing queen and like twerking and just getting it.
Yes, I know. I can picture exactly how he's moving.
You can?
Well, it's just these kind of exaggerated movements for no reason. You know what I mean? They can't stand still.
Yeah.
And that's what I call wired for sound.
Yeah. He was gaunt, and people said he appeared to be on death's door because he was already a very slight guy, and then taking all of the speed, he's even skinnier and even scrawnier little guy.
Well,
because he's very small, and he's kind of got like that wiry, like lean muscle build, right?
Yeah.
But now that's all gone, and he's just like skinny, got a sunken in face.
Well, a skinny guy like that can lose 25 pounds below his normal weight and just look. He doesn't have a lot to give, as far as weight goes, right?
So sometime after returning to New York City, Groovy meets a girl named Linda. No one thought much of it because Groovy was always hanging out with different girls, and they were the kind who'd come from nice suburban homes. What is known about Groovy's last day is he spent part of it sleeping in a sleeping bag outside the Psychedelicatessen,
Okay.
which is a great name.
I was going to say we have to talk about how great a name that is.
Right?
That's one of the best names ever.
People who knew Groovy saw him in the afternoon and in the evening, though they described him as distant, withdrawn, and not as friendly as usual. Those who knew Groovy said hello, but were ignored. And again, this is very strange because he's a super outgoing guy. He's always zooming around, life of the party, Mr. Social.
So he's acting out of the ordinary for himself.
Exactly. Just after midnight on October 8th of 1967, a janitor who lived in a basement room by the boiler at 169 Avenue B, which was a hippie flophouse, found a young couple naked with their heads bashed in with what appeared to be bricks.
Oh my God.
Charged with the murder was a man named Don Ramsey, a 26-year-old who had spent time for rape in prison. He was a practitioner of the Yoruba faith, an African religion. According to Ramsey, he had taken LSD that night and was, quote, flying. I saw spots, colors, and whirling things and heard bells going off.
Sounds like a rather interesting high.
Linda had been sexually assaulted by 4 men before being beaten to death. Her nude body was found lying 4 feet from Groovy's. In addition to Ramsey, 3 other men were sought for the rape. According to Ramsey, they had an acid party in the boiler room. Police theorized Linda was lured to the basement along with her boyfriend with promises of LSD, so the assailants could get her down there and then rape her.
Oh my God. And can I say, I've seen pictures of this very boiler room and where the crime took place, and it is terrifying. It is like one of the scariest spaces I've ever laid eyes on.
It's dirty, trash everywhere.
Yes, it's just this old, dank basement with a few pieces of rotting furniture in it. And there's a scary-looking boiler. I mean, it's everything you could imagine in a boiler room basement.
So a complete nightmare of a place.
A hell of a place to take a hallucinogenic and hang out, I gotta say. Because I feel like just
something out of a horror movie.
The creepiness of the room alone, I feel, would make you have what I would consider a bad trip.
Any minute, Jigsaw is going to turn up and be like, do you want to play a game?
Yes, you have a choice. For far too long, you've enjoyed the LSD and getting high.
And now you're in a boiler room.
Now you got to cut your dick off to survive.
And like throw it in the boiler.
Yes.
Only by burning your manhood will you survive. You must choose. It's your choice.
Well, a handyman named Fred Wright was also arrested. 31-year-old Wright also lived in this tenement building where the murders took place. Earlier the day before the murders, a girl had gone to police to report Wright had raped and robbed her.
So they're just out of control.
He's just out doing crimes, it sounds like. The murders were estimated to be around 1 a.m. on Sunday morning. Wright had no record, but they held him on a $50,000 bond because of these 2 separate crimes. Wright had been responsible for reporting the murders to police at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, but he had not actually contacted police after finding the bodies, but instead he had gone to a girlfriend's apartment to think it over before he called police.
Oh, okay.
To sort of weigh his options. Like, well, do I go to police because then they'll know I'm involved? Or do I report it and then they'll think I didn't have anything to do with it? Yeah.
Well, don't do criminal shit and you won't have to figure these types of things out.
The bodies were found lying face down in a blood-soaked room. Their clothes were neatly folded in a pile, which police found very strange, that someone had taken the time and care to fold up their clothing.
That would strike me odd in a scene like this.
2 white bricks were located and determined to be the murder weapons. Police sent 50 officers to canvass the area before finally cracking the case. So, one of the ways they figured out that Don Ramsey was a suspect was because everybody in the building was being questioned. And upon being questioned by police, as all the residents were, Ramsey denied living in the building. He said he was just there visiting a friend.
So he's trying to distance himself from the building. It's from everything.
And neighbors said otherwise, and they pointed police to his apartment, which he had several signs outside the apartment that said Black Power.
Okay.
and lived there with his wife.
Oh, so he has a whole wife
He
upstairs.
has a whole wife upstairs,
Okay, but he's just
pretending he doesn't live there.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know her. And then there's
yeah.
there's a picture of him and her, their wedding picture right behind. Yeah.
Police found this very suspicious, and they took him downtown for further questioning. From the interview, police were able to piece together that 4 men had been in the boiler room when Linda was raped, and that they had all been high on LSD. Police said there were only 3 keys that could be used to get into the boiler room, and Fred Wright had one of them. Because he's the janitor or like this, maintenance guy at this building.
So he's one of 3 people who have access to the space.
Yeah, and the others were not there. It was like the owner of the building.
So if he had just answered questions like everyone else, yeah, I live here. No, I haven't seen anything strange. I'll try to think and see if I remember anything. They would have just kept it moving.
A third man, a vagrant named Thomas Dennis, was also arrested for his role in the rape and murder. Now, Galahad spoke to the press and said, quote, "They were out to get Groovy because he would let kids have drugs at cost price. He was nothing but good, and they got him for it." When pressed about who got him, Galahad said, quote, "Pushers from uptown," claiming Groovy's murder had been related to some kind of drug turf war.
Yeah, I mean, he was a noble guy. He gave kids drugs at cost. I mean, it's just
out here doing the Lord's work.
That's a very odd statement, right?
Al Katzman, editor of an underground newspaper, thought there might have been another motive for the killings. He said, quote, "The people down here resent the hippies moving in. The people down here are struggling to get out of the ghetto, and they resent it when they find the hippie kids from middle-class backgrounds are rejecting things like television and cars and suburban homes, the very things the people in the ghetto want. It's like an insult." He pointed to rising rents as hippies moved into the East Village, pushing out people who couldn't afford to live there now. Also, there had been a proposed housing project for low-income families in the area, but the developers decided to make it like a middle-class housing development because they realized they could get more money from rents in this area.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, this is the age-old story of gentrification.
Yes.
That you have people living in an impoverished area. They're already struggling to make it, barely making it. And then, cost of living's increasing because you have these trustafarian kids coming from these nice, moneyed families and rebelling against mom and dad. So we'll go live in this, kind of, inner city neighborhood and all this mess. And I could see the resentment of the people already living there towards these types. Not saying you should murder them, but I could see those frustration, why they would be frustrated.
Well, Katzman said many hippies in the East Village were getting beaten up and stabbed regularly, but they were not always reporting it to authorities. Rapes and assaults were going unreported because the hippies were anti-establishment and, of course, saw police as part of the establishment.
Which, unfortunately for them, is going to make them an even bigger target to people that want to exploit them. If you can go kick the shit out of and rob or whatever, rape someone, and them not even report it to police, that's certainly going to make you do it more.
And that's what Katzman said. He pointed to the hippie lifestyle of drugs and sort of free living, and that a lot of these kids did have money and came from money, which attracted criminals like muggers and rapists. He basically said they were like ducks on the pond because they're ultra trusting and loving, and they believe in sharing everything and, oh yeah, you need a place to stay, come to my house, and then they get robbed and raped and beaten and stabbed.
They're not street smart.
Well, they're all willing to see the good in others.
Yeah.
And they're naive.
I mean, that makes the perfect victim, unfortunately.
Those who knew Linda said she was really afraid of this neighborhood, but had seen Groovy as her protector because he was very known in the neighborhood and he had street smarts. People said, though they met her at the cave and other hangouts, Linda was not really a hippie and didn't really fit in with everyone, and that it would be easy for anyone looking to do something bad to her or looking to do something bad, that she would have been an easy mark. Because she didn't fit in and she had this air about her she came from money.
So she doesn't even fit in with the hippies who are not fitting into the neighborhood.
Right.
And so someone looking for someone to exploit or prey upon, she's going to stick
I
out.
think Billy Joel sang about her, Dylan. She was an uptown girl.
Living in a downtown world.
Yes, and it wasn't really working out for her. Now, Linda's family held a funeral service at Christ Episcopal Church in Greenwich, and she's buried near Round Hill Stables, where she used to ride horses. The newspaper reported the stark socioeconomic differences in Linda and Groovy as, quote, first class in steerage.
Oh.
Just kind of a rude way to describe that she was wealthy and he was not.
Basically saying where they would stay on a boat going across on a long voyage, she would be in first class and he would be back there in steerage.
Yeah.
With the poorest of the people on the boat.
And what an unlikely couple they were. And we use the term couple very loosely because though the newspaper described them as boyfriend and girlfriend, these were people who are not really living like that kind of lifestyle.
No.
They were just hanging out.
Right.
At the time.
They were known to hang out.
Yeah. Though Groovy's head was badly mutilated by the brick, his family insisted on an open casket. It took an undertaker nearly 2 days to fix his injuries. He was buried on October 13th at Highland Memorial Park in Rhode Island. Galahad and nearly 30 other flower children attended the service where he played harmonica. And he said, quote, "I know how Groovy would have wanted it like this."
You know, I mean, every family's different, and it's certainly their business to choose that. But the open casket kind of weirds me out.
It weirds me out,
especially the insistence upon it at no matter the circumstance. And just know this, so I can have this on the record in the public: I do not need an open casket. I'm not going to keep very long once I expire. And please just remember me, my big dumb fat face as it is right now.
No, we're not going to do any of that.
Don't. You don't want to see this.
Well, I don't want to.
You don't want to see this.
I don't want to remember you that way, Dawn.
I don't want you to remember me looking like that either. I mean, I don't know. It just kind of weirds me out anyway. It's like I'd want to remember my loved one like the last time I saw them or something, or when they were having a good time and laughing, feeling
we've
really
talked about it
good.
before, and everybody does have different feelings about the grieving process and funerals and how to honor your loved one. But I'm weirded out.
Well, especially.
And I've seen the process of what
reconstruction
happens
and all that.
Yeah, and having like literally been 2 feet away and watching someone getting embalmed and that whole process.
Right.
I don't know. And what they do to the body to prepare it for service. I mean, it's some pretty horrific stuff.
Well, see, that's the thing. Even if you do, it's a tradition of open casket in your family. I get it. But then you have some, a horrible murder like this. I just feel like it would be like, oh my God, I can't believe what they did to my loved one. But let's just let him rest and just leave it be. Because I can't imagine, even after 2 days of work, he probably still didn't look exactly normal.
Well, yeah, he had his head smashed in with a brick.
Yeah.
His face.
I just don't know why you would do that to yourself.
Well, after death, Groovy was beatified. One writer called him, quote, his generation's young rebel. And another writer said he was, quote, an urban Huck Finn.
Wow, that's a great quote.
Linda's brother Perry told the New York Times, quote, it's too late for the whole thing to do us much good, but maybe somebody else can learn something from it, meaning Linda's story. Drug-induced violence was nothing new to neighborhoods where hippies lived. The phenomenon of murders committed under the influence of LSD had already become commonplace in San Francisco. The deaths of Groovy and Linda only added extra horror to the scene and sent a chill through hippiedom. In the East Village following the murders, many hippies were convinced it was time to move on. One girl told the New York Times, quote, that chick wasn't anything to us, but Groovy, oh Groovy, it's like our eyes were gone.
Okay.
In 2013, the band Chelsea Light Moving released a song called Groovy and Linda. And this is very strange, Dylan, because I have dug as deep as my research will allow me to dig, and I cannot find details of what became of the 3 men who were charged with the murders, other than reports they were all 3 members of a black nationalist cult.
Really?
The cult was called the Nubian Nation. The founder, Dwight York, was arrested in May of 2002 for child sex abuse after being charged with 197 counts of child molestation and trafficking minors as young as 8 across state lines.
So you can't tell what happened, the trial, what they were sent.
I cannot find anything.
Guilty.
I can't find any record of prison sentences, no record of the trial.
And I have to imagine this was a pretty, probably a pretty sensationalized case back then.
Well, it was, it was a big case.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reports of the murder, but I cannot seem to find a single bit of information about the 3 perpetrators.
Okay, I'll finish. I'll tell you what happened to them. This is what I think. Were they 3 black gentlemen?
They were 3 black men, yes.
They were all found guilty of rape and murder. And even if they had not committed the crime, which it sounds like they did, they would have been found guilty anyway because there was 3 black gentlemen in front of our wonderful system back then.
Probably.
So I think likely they went to jail. But it is very odd that there is no follow-up on what happened to the perpetrators.
Well, the Yoruba religion that Don Ramsey practiced, I couldn't find that it was exactly tied to this black nationalistic cult, because there seemed to be a lot of like Muslim groups that kind of belonged to this cult.
Assalamu
Sure. But it was reported when he was arrested, like he wore a fez as part of his religious attire.
So
and
he
showed
was
up to his court appearances,
wearing the guy from that 70s show.
Like got special permission to wear his fez as part of his religion.
You didn't laugh. I said he was wearing the guy from that 70s show.
Yeah, I heard you, and it was stupid. So I'm just ignoring you, bro.
Okay. All right.
And some people have speculated, like, oh, well, could this have been almost like a hate crime?
Or some ritualistic thing in the cult, maybe?
Well, I think people were just pointing to the fact that, maybe it could have possibly been a hate crime. But, back then they didn't really, I guess, call it that.
Well, and it doesn't, if it's white people that's been murdered, it can't be a hate crime, according to nowadays. Right? I mean, that's how they act.
Yeah, but like the cult leader, Dwight York.
Yeah.
I was reading some of the very sensational statements that he had made in regards to the white devil. Basically, we deserve to die.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
We're just inherently violent and evil.
The pink devils from the Caucasus Mountains, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So who knows? It's a really sad story.
It is really sad. And I think, honestly, it sounds like...
It almost is like a cautionary tale about, being young and going off on your own, but kind of getting yourself into bad situations.
Well, I think, and this happens to this day, isn't it? And obviously the hippie movement was the main driver during this time, but this is a tale old as time. You have young people who are dabbling in drugs.
And
naive.
Trusting.
And they think they can, and they keep, getting into meeting these kinds of different people and stuff. And they probably meet a bunch of cool people at first, but then there's always that small percentage of predators and monsters hiding around the edges, just waiting to take advantage of someone. And so, yeah, that's unfortunate. And I worry about this. If we was to move to New Orleans or something, just to, you got to be aware of your surroundings, and you can't walk around, naively walk around places. You have to keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah, Dylan. So that means you are not allowed to take drugs from strangers, because you're going to end up in a boiler room.
Ah.
Right?
Yes.
Because you're naive.
You're saying I can't take drugs from strangers.
Well, because you're naive and a little stupid.
Yeah.
And if somebody were like, hey, would you want to go have an acid party in this boiler room basement? You would be like, sure.
I'd tell them no.
That's not true.
And I'm sexy too, so that's going to get me in trouble.
That's true.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to remember that rule. No drug. What if I know them? Can I take the drugs?
No.
No drugs is
Dylan,
what you're saying?
You're too old to be taking drugs and parties.
Yeah. Well, of course.
It's time to grow up.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Okay.
Who does that?
You're a grandpa.
No.
Right? And at this point in your life, it's kind of grody.
Yeah.
You're not 20 anymore.
Well, yeah. That's why I don't do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, thank you for that story, the cautionary tale. Certainly is, I've never heard of that. The Groovy Murders.
That is what it has been dubbed, yes.
And yeah, that was a very good story. But I mean, tragic and unfortunate. And it's you take Linda's parents, and then they find out all these things about Linda after the fact, as far as what life she was living, how she was living. And then you add that on top of the loss of their daughter. I'm sure they were just completely devastated.
Yeah, there was a Vanity Fair article, which I used as one of my resources today. And I think even in death, it was clear that her parents, well, there was an Esquire article and several New York Times articles, I believe a Vanity Fair. But one of them was titled The Two Worlds of Linda Fitzpatrick. And it was obvious that even in death, Linda's parents were still very much in denial about what she was doing.
Oh, well, so they can't admit it to themselves.
Like her friends in New York had mentioned, she was really interested in Eastern religions, Buddhism. She had started to sort of read up and study Buddhism. And her sister's like, that's ridiculous. She was not interested in anything like that. So, even in death, her family was still a bit in denial about what she had been doing and
Right.
what she had been up to.
Yeah, because there was a lot. It seems there was a lot about herself she wasn't telling her family.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's really sad to think, that a young person feels like they can't be themselves around their family.
Yeah, no matter the reason.
Or they have to hide who they are, what they're interested in. I mean, of course, most parents are not going to be like, yeah, I think it's great for you to be taking lots of drugs and meth and LSD. Do it. But even beyond that.
Well, it seems like even on a philosophical level or a religious level, she couldn't be honest with her parents and family about who she was or how she felt.
Right.
Yeah, and that is truly sad.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like they were quite a conservative family.
Right.
And maintained certain standards and had certain expectations of her, and that she was rebelling, I believe, a little bit against the lifestyle.
Yup. Sounds like it. And unfortunately for her and Groovy, they met an untimely end, being tortured and brutalized.
Fucking hippies, man. It starts out like this, it just starts out like this cool movement, right? It's peace and love and like the flower children and, sort of rejecting materialism
And capitalism.
and sharing and peace, peace and love. And then it just quickly turns sideways.
And you know why? It's the human factor. It's what humans do to stuff. You take something even cool and wholesome and a great idea on paper, and humans fuck it up. Because not only do you have the people who take advantage of someone like that, you have other people who take advantage of your kindness and your openness, and they like mooch off of you and stuff, and they're really just lazy pieces of shit. You know what I mean? So there's always someone out there looking to take advantage of you in some form or fashion.
So always looking for an angle.
Yeah. Yeah, because you take a group of people who are like, hey, man, we can all share and it'll be easy and we all can have the minimal effort to, make it. And then you'll have people who do their part, and then you'll have other people that are just using them.
Charles Manson.
Yeah, well, you'll have Charles
Manson's
Manson.
like a perfect example of a guy who swooped in on this type of culture and manipulated and used all of this to his advantage.
Yeah, perfect example. There you go.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting that this murder was a precursor to the Manson murders, because on the East Coast, this was the big hippie murder, and this was a big story of the cracks in the hippie culture.
The end of the summer of love.
Yeah. And then, a few years later on the West Coast, you had the Manson family murders, and that was really it's the end of this peace and love.
Right. And I mean, you have all the strangeness surrounding Manson and the movement.
Well, yeah, honey, we
all
get
that.
It's not what we're talking about.
No.
But cool. All right. So if you have any case suggestions, something you'd like to hear Mountain Murders cover, you can always email us at mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget our Patreon. We've had some new folks subscribe over at patreon.com where they access their ad-free episodes and bonus content. And that's patreon.com/mountainmurderspodcast. It's a great way to support the show. And you can always follow us on social media. Our Instagram is Appalachian True Crime. And you can find us on Twitter at Mountain Murders Podcast.
And you can swing by the old YouTube channel, throw us punch that subscribe button. We are just a few people away from being able to monetize that to a certain degree. That would really help us out. And yeah. Just.
And yeah.
And yeah.
And yeah.
That's my new catch.
Dylan, and yeah.
It's my new catchphrase.
That ain't nothing but a bowl of beans, Dylan.
It's my new catchphrase. I'm not sure what it's going to look like on a t-shirt. And yeah. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Yeah, hopefully when we're back with our midweek episode, we will not be so stuffy.
Yeah.
And you might be able to tolerate our voices a little more. But
Yeah.
thanks for sticking by us through the rain, the snow, rich, poor, sick, and in health.
And the snot.
Until death do us part, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to make Heather some hot tea and put her to bed.
Oh my gosh, please. That sounds amazing. All right, guys. Keep it groovy, but not so groovy that you end up in a boiler room somewhere.
That's perfect.
Okay, peace out.